everybody doing? Good? So hey, the next panel is about actually a pretty important topic called load management. I almost feel like there's a lot of confusion about what that really is. So I'm going to let the panelists introduce themselves. So Scott, you want to go ahead?
Sure. Thanks everybody for being here and sitting in on this most important of all the presentations today. No, I'm just kidding. I'm the minor league performance manager for the Boston Red Sox, and I've been in that role for the last year. Previously worked for the U.S. Olympic Committee as high performance director for their winter sport teams. So, welcome.
Thanks, Scott. Andrea?
Hi, I'm Andrea Hootie. I'm with UConn Women's Basketball. I'm Director of Sports Performance. And after a long career, I returned in men's basketball. I returned to women's basketball to start my PhD and provide numbers and research so people have comparisons.
Thank you. Tal?
Hi, my name is Tal Brown. I'm the CEO and founder of a company called Zone 7. We create AI deep learning models that try and address load management type questions like injury risk and potential interventions, and we kind of look at it from the data side and apply AI to that.
And my name is Scott Greenberg. I'm the CEO of a startup called Coolmint, and we provide polymer cooling technology, which enhances strength and performance.
Right. So hey, like I said, as far as load management, I feel like we've heard the stories about Kawhi Leonard, when he was at the Spurs and he went to the Raptors, and I feel like there's a lot of confusion what that really is. So I'm going to ask you guys, how would you define load management? Maybe Scott, do you want to start?
Sure, I'll start, and it's really simple in terms of the definition that I'm going to provide you. It's finding the balance between stress and recovery in order to optimize and maximize player health and performance. So really,
You might want to put your microphone closer. Yeah.
all right. So I'll start over again. So really, for me, it's quite simple, and it's trying to find the right balance between stress, training stimuli, and what you're using to help improve a player, and recovery in order to really maximize performance gains and at the same time keep athletes healthy and on the field of play.
And there's also a difference, right, between external and internal load. So do you want to explain maybe what external load versus internal load means?
Sure. External load would be the things that you encounter in your external environment, the training, the running, the lifting, kind of those things that are impacting the physical body. But everybody kind of carries around as well internal stress, whether it comes from breaking up with a girlfriend or stress around a car accident or things that are taxing the body and creating stress and a load that you have to do. The body has to deal with. So oftentimes those can be discounted, but they're stressing the body sometimes just as much as what you're doing in the weight room.
Yeah. Andrea, do you want to address it?
Yeah, I would agree with everything you said about definition of load management. It is what it is. Kind of defines itself in a way. We look at internal loading and external loading. I always use the example of if you have two cars, same year, both have 100,000 miles on it, and that volume is the same, but how they got there, that cumulative load might be different. So did your teenager drive one car, and did your grandparent drive the other? Which one do you want to buy, right? So I think looking at load management and understanding the stress in the system and trying to optimize performance and stay healthy is what I define load management as.
Yeah, thank you, Andrea. Tal?
Yeah, so for me as a data person, I'm looking at the process of managing load. To me, it's about what are the variables that we can control on a daily, weekly, annual, seasonal routine to achieve the same thing, which is a maximum gain in performance with a maximum availability. These are competing, conflicting almost agendas. We want to increase performance by adding stimulus, but adding too much stimulus will create real risk of breaking down. So to me, load management, or the process of load management, is how do we calibrate all these parameters? And it's really, really hard. Some things we can control, like lifting in the gym. Some things we can kind of control. We can restrict minutes on a court, but what happens in those minutes is not really something we fully control. What happens at night or outside the facility is not that controllable. So trying to solve that is really what load management is for us. And I also agree with the fact that things that happen in your body without a physical stimulus are just as important and have a huge impact on longevity and performance.
Yeah, thanks, Tal. Scott?
Yeah, I think going last, I don't have too much to add on top, but I asked around a bunch of our customers how they define it. And Julian, I think it's interesting that I didn't sit in on any of the other talks earlier today, but I'm curious to know, did you have to actually go around and ask, how do you define what the topic is? And I think that's interesting about load management. It's kind of early on, and the definition, people have different definitions. But when I asked around some of our customers, it was the monitoring and adjusting of a cumulative stress over the course of a season and I think building on, I'll echo exactly what you said, Scott, for performance enhancement and reducing the risk of injuries throughout the course of the season.
Yeah, which brings my next question. Well, as I mentioned, I feel like load management is sometimes misunderstood. But maybe, Scott, why do you think there's such almost like a controversy around load management?
There's a couple of ways I think you can interpret controversy around this. I'm going to stay away from the things that have been talked about, or maybe others want to comment on about players sitting out from games and the controversy that arises when that happens. I'm going to deal with it more from the performance side, I guess, because baseball, it's 162 games over 180 days. A player will sit every once in a while. No one really kind of gets bent out of shape about that. But I think kind of where there's confusion or controversy is just there's a perception around load management that it's always used to help dial things back and pull things back. And you talk about load management with a coach, you talk about load management with players, and their initial wall goes up is like, you're going to tell me I'm doing too much, and this is all going to be about restricting play and the things that are happening with players. But that's only part of the equation. And you need to also look at it as it's an opportunity, it's a vehicle in order to push and kind of really identify on an individual athlete level what players can handle and sometimes not pull them back, but push them towards what it is that they need to be doing in order to attain that optimal stimulus. So that's where I'll start with.
Yeah, and also I remember not too long ago, I think some NBA team where I was sitting down some NBA players, and I don't know if I'm wrong about this, but I believe the NBA said, you got to stop doing this, right? So I don't know if you guys have that in the MLB. Did that ever happen?
Players are rested. Again, it's a lot of games in just a slightly longer period of time.
Right.
But again, it's rare, I think, that someone gets criticized for a player sitting for a game. It's just, it's part of the sport. But Tal, you kind of commented in your presentation earlier about all the NBA kind of back-to-backs, and it's a little bit different when you have a smaller schedule and you're wanting to see LeBron play and he's sitting, or Steph Curry. But it doesn't seem to happen as much in baseball.
Yeah, you're right. Andrea, what's your take on this whole load management, and what do you think?
I think the controversy is that it means different things for different people in different teams, because the parameters are not all the same for whatever sport you're playing, and not every athlete is the same. Some athletes, you can throw the kitchen sink at them and they respond in a positive way. And then some of the best players might not be the best athletes, but you're trying to limit them or build them up, and it's constantly dynamic and very fluid, and it changes based on internal stress, external stress, and coaches just want to see practice, and they see practice as what practice is, but then that practice affects everybody differently.
Yeah, no, good point.
Could I add in on that? I think another piece, and just to build off of what you said, is you have this model that's been presented, load management models and ranges and acute to chronic workload ratios and all this, which, by the way, is just kind of a renaming of all the principles that we've abided by previously, general adaptation and progressive overload and all of that stuff, just a rebranding. But these models are presented, and to Andrew's point, it describes a population, or maybe it is important for a population, but population numbers, they characterize everything but describe no one, right? That's not a single athlete that you work with. So it's taking that model and being able to expand it, or those ideas, and work with players on an individual athlete level to really find what their specific needs are. Because there will be pitchers that you are wary of, and after 10 pitches, you're like, oh man, we need to get that guy out. And others, you feel comfortable after 100 pitches that they're still ready to go and can handle more. So it's that individualization, just to piggyback off of what you said.
No, you're right. It really depends on the athletes, right? So, Tal, do you want to jump in?
Yeah, I think for me, when you talk about load management and kind of you zoom out from the early images of players resting, like there are three forces here at play. That, we want to look after player health and longevity, longer careers, more playing time, etc. We want to hit as many wins as we can, or as close as we can to our expected wins metric. And also, this is more on a league perspective, we want to put out the best product out there for our broadcasting partners. And when All-Stars don't play in the NBA or the equivalent in any other sport, that product is impacted negatively. I spoke earlier this morning about Messi playing Inter Miami playing in Chicago, road game, Messi not playing for whatever reason, and then the Chicago Fire club crediting fans who bought expensive tickets because the guy they really wanted to watch didn't show up. So those three forces, right, like the best product out there for broadcasters, looking after player health and winning, they're colliding. And each perspective in this kind of space continuum is looking at loads management differently. And that's part of the, maybe not confusion, that's part of the inherent conflict that there is around, what do we optimize for? Like, of these very broadly three different objectives.
Yeah, thanks, Tal. Scott?
Yeah, it's interesting. I think the principles of load management have been around for ages, and I think they traditionally were applied with bringing players back from injury, where you were managing their load and managing the stress factors on them as you were bringing them back up to get ready for play. I don't really think that the principles are all that different. I think maybe where the controversy comes from now, that was reactive, right? We were reacting to a situation and applying load management principles to that. I think the controversy here is now it's being proactive, where people are now proactively, looking at load management to potentially prevent that. And I think anytime you're applying prevention or selling prevention, it's a difficult sell. It's hard. I think it's hard, for people to kind of understand and grasp. And I think that's, in my opinion, where a lot of the controversy is coming from.
Yeah, and maybe so the next question, which is really about the importance, right? So how important as technologies become to manage, right, or better manage load management, right? So there's so many types of solutions, right? So for example, Scott, you guys, you kind of help to slow down the fatigue level, right, of the players. I mean, there's super advanced like wearable technologies, right, to measure your hydration level. Of course, you can measure like the distance run, right, things like that. But so, I guess my question to you guys is maybe Scott, to you, how important have technologies become to better manage load management?
Sure. I think technology has been critical and instrumental and has allowed us to get good data that provides insights into various aspects of training and performance, which otherwise may have just been subjective evaluations. So in terms of numbers and in terms of understanding and quantifying what things are being done, it's opened up tremendous doors. But then at the same time, it can never capture everything. And so there's benefits of technology, and there's also risks because sometimes you think that it is capturing everything, and a lot of times the belief is that technology is smarter than people, and technology produces data. The power that comes from it, though, is when you put it in the hands of an intelligent coach who understands what it means and combines that with expertise and knowledge. And so, yeah, use technology, but use it carefully.
Well, you also have the human element, right? I mean, data will tell you something, but it doesn't tell you everything, right? So,
I agree. Yes.
right. Andrea, do you have any comments on that?
Yeah, I think technology is really important, but is technology important for the people that you're working for? Is the question. The ability to be able to connect dots between the technology that we use, I think, is the key to innovation and trying to understand where people are coming from, how they adapt, and how we can avoid, injury, increase performance. We use Oura rings with force plate data, and you look at sleep, it's very individual. You don't have to have 8 hours. Some of our best athletes have less than 8 hours, who are more consistent in force production on a daily basis. And then some of the kids they're the athletes who sleep 8 hours, they actually have less anterior posterior deviation in a vertical jump, which is really good. But what affects, everybody's different, and it's hard to really capture those general ideas and try to apply them to each individual.
And obviously, Tal, you guys are a technology vendor, right? Yeah.
So my take is this. Some areas in the sports economy are 100% determined by data and algorithms, like pricing a ticket for fans and determining how to optimize for supply of merchandise in a team store at a game. Load management will never be determined by AI and data. Like there's a human expert who sees the broad picture, who speaks to players, treats players, and we want to support that operator. That operator is not going anywhere. In fact, in my opinion, that's going to be how things need. That is how things need to run. What we can do from a technology perspective is support that process. So the first wave of technologies was about measuring stuff that wasn't measured beforehand, whether it's force outputs on a force plate or running on a field or whatever that is. The second kind of wave of technology is around, all right, there's lots of data coming. How do we store it? How do we visualize it? If we do want to create some heuristics like an acute chronic ratio, how do we do that visually? And then there will be, or maybe there is already, technology that helps find these kind of hidden blind spots in the data, these patterns that are out there that it's hard to find using those two initial approaches. But ultimately, these are all tools at the hand of the artist and not, machine-generated ChatGPT load management. I personally, as a guy who has been kind of advocating for AI in this field, I don't think there will ever be a ChatGPT for load management. So it's about technology that's crafted to support the expert, not beyond.
So Tal, I'm pretty sure somebody's working on ChatGPT to manage load management right now. Somebody's going to try to sell you that.
So I have two opinions about that.
Yeah.
Both of them are similar. Number one is I don't think it's going to work technically from an AI perspective. I don't think it's feasible to try and do that. The second thing is good luck having people engage with that. Because people who do these jobs in the NBA, NFL, soccer, whatever, they're not really after that ChatGPT thing. Maybe ChatGPT could work for, couch to 5K run, or, let me go from, some kind of fitness program on an individual kind of like consumer level if it's very basic and rudimentary, but anything beyond that, I personally don't think is feasible from a technical perspective.
Thank you, Scott. Do you have any comments on that as well?
No. This pretty much covered it. The only thing I would lump on, I think, at the end here is, I think that's a topic much broader than load management. I think it just goes for everything. How much weight do you give technology? And I think, to me, it's an impartial voice. It's a data input that you take into the overall decision that you're going to make, but it shouldn't be the overriding concern. I think you can never replace the human element from the decision-making process, and it's really just, a trusted voice, amongst many other factors that you should take into account when making decisions.
Yeah. Before I get to the last question, I want to ask you, some of you, have you come across some success stories of technologies? You can even say a vendor, right? Where you felt like load management really helped your team, right, for example, to better manage load management. Can you guys think of anything? Maybe Scott or Andrea? Any success stories?
So look, the GPS monitoring and kind of tracking of players and accelerations and distances run, it's helped kind of guide and shape the way in which some of our training is now being done at the Red Sox. So yeah, insight into information is changing the way that work is being done there.
Great. Andrea?
Yeah, I think that in my situation, I have probably more athlete engagement than coach engagement with the technology. Having an athlete that is a superstar on our team, watching her grow and engaging with the data, understanding who she is, what she could tolerate, and what drives her or motivates her to be the best athlete that she can be. I think technology has really helped her develop as an athlete and grow as an individual. It's nice to see the data and visualize it, and then she tells me how she feels and she follows it, and every day we have a check-in, and I think it's pretty cool that we have athletes that are more engaged than coaches.
It's so much better than my example.
Hey, so guys, last question, right? So we talked about load management, what that is. So in the next 24 months, how do you guys see the world of management evolving, right? Are we looking at a world where, because using like advanced sensors, algorithm, they'll be able, the system will be able to tell them, hey, look, this guy's getting fatigued, you might want to slow him down, or maybe not, have him play the next game. I mean, where do you guys see this world coming? I'm not talking about ChatGPT. I'm talking about bigger than that. Where do you guys see this world evolving in the next 24 months?
I can take a step. I think that there's a few trends that we're seeing happening. One is that the fidelity of game data is increasing. And I think the prominent example for that is that more and more leagues are producing what you call skeletal profiles in real time. Every player, 100 times a second, whatever the speed is. NBA are starting to do it now. Champions League in Europe have been doing that. There's a couple of companies in that space. That's going to be really, really, really game-changing, sorry for the pun, because it's going to allow us not just to look at workload in the sense of like movement and sprints and accels, but also at skeletal profiles, jumping for a rebound, which leg landed first, change of direction, things like that, knee angles, hip angles. That's going to be driving a lot of innovation in the load management field. Not just because of data, but also because it's going to be available in near real time. So, today a lot of these things are done in practice, maybe real time, but during a game could be a little bit more clunky. But there's a universe where load management insights become available, at halftime, and then every quarter, and then every timeout. And the gap is gonna close. So that's one trend that we think that we're seeing. The other one is with the operators, people in this room doing these jobs. The tide is rising. Everybody's so much more exposed to AI and data tools than they were 5-10 years ago. And so we see the workflows changing. And this is maybe more hopeful than based on real data, but also the connecting tissue that looks at load management, which is coaching and medical and SNC and data. Those loops are going to become tighter and better orchestrated, which I think is traditionally more siloed. So those silos hopefully are breaking down.
Thanks, Todd. Anybody else? Scott, Andrea?
Yeah, I mean, my outlook for the next 24 months, it's optimistic. I think that I know of some studies that are just starting to be conducted now in load management. So I think, over the next couple of years, I think there's going to be more research, more data, which I think will lead to more discussion, which should lead to less controversy and more sort of coalescing over the important facts.
Anybody else?
I think in the university setting, this new wave of free market with the NIL is really going to change because athletes are picking schools left and right. And I think the more that we can educate the athlete and the coaches on what's safer for everyone, I think that's better off.
So I'll throw a couple of thoughts out there as well. I think more and more we're gonna, like, everything that we measure right now is kind of mechanical for the most part, or physical. But as kind of technology develops and we're able to kind of track biomarkers and actual physiology, things that are changing in the player, we get a deeper insight into not only what they're doing kind of as in response to their external load, but how maybe some of those internal loads are impacting the body. So I think that's one, and the technology's coming, and in some cases it's already there. I think another place is expansion on sports specificity. If anybody's out there who has a great pitch intensity monitor that can be used remotely with players in the off season, come look me up. But tools that are geared more towards specific aspects of a sport and the demands in that sport are going to be ways that the field evolves. And then lastly, I'm going to say context. And you can appreciate the fact that 10 pitches thrown in the ninth inning with the bases loaded is a little bit different in terms of a stressor than those same 10 pitches thrown in the bottom of the second inning. But now you start to expand it out, like the pitches and the pitches and the pitch, biomechanics and what's happening there, and looking at kind of other things that relate to things like injury. It's not just workload, but it's all these other factors that come together and combine, looking at it more holistically. And again, work is being done there, and some are more ahead of others in terms of like the models and the processing and how they're looking at that. But I think kind of we're going to see more efforts to look at the bigger context and how kind of training load and external load and internal load fit into that.
Great, thanks, Scott. So we've got 5 minutes left. We're going to have for Q&A. Do you have any questions for the panelists? Anybody? Can I just come right here?
So I've been a part of discussion with the ATP Tour, Tennis Tour. Scott, great to see you.
See you too.
Yes, and the ATP just recently made player data available, Hawkeye data. The players could get it without having to pay Hawkeye a fee for it. And they're quickly moving on to the space of being able to provide an athlete management system for the tour as a whole, to provide access to this Hawkeye data that will tell them some information about movement and acceleration, deceleration, but also they're going to start using wearables on the tour and allow players to wear them when they're playing. So what advice would you give to the ATP Tour to say, hey, here's an athlete management system that all of its applicants would be have access to, and then they would have to train their coaches and their teams to use that information. But an amazing effort, if you think about it, to provide what's traditionally a sport of individuals who all have to have their own teams, access to something like an AMS.
So my advice would be, which AMS or what kind of visualization tools is just like one topic. The hardest thing I think to get right is the compliance and the completeness of the data, which has nothing to do with the software itself. It's more around operationalizing and collecting. So the value of the AMS or data set is really related to how well the data is collected. I'll pick maybe the most difficult example we encounter, which is in soccer. A player could be playing for a club in the Premier League. They're using one type of wearable, and they go and play for and the Premier League will use Exactum Spectrum or Hawkeye, and they play for the National Cup, which is a different optical system, and they play for FIFA or UEFA, and they go play for. So getting that data stream stitched together in a consistent way is, to me, the most important thing, even more than whether the software is flashy or whatever. That's kind of my take.
Thanks. Anybody else? Have any questions?
I'll add on to that as well. I think when you get into this data lake or ocean, as the case would be, of really being focused on what's important, and an athlete can get lost and the coach can get lost in kind of too much information, and there's stuff in there that means absolutely nothing. It's going to have no impact, but you can get wrapped around the axle in thinking about it. So developing guidelines around what's important, and also understanding which variables are worth comparing to the rest of the ATP Tour and the WTA, and which ones are more grounded and more relevant in terms of your profile and kind of you serving as your own control. Because without guidance in those areas, it will get kind of messy.
Thanks, Scott. Anybody else? Any questions? Yeah.
This would be for all four of you. Question B, if you had to give your best one tip in one sentence form, what is the best practice to optimize load management?
Okay, it's been said already, so I'm going to steal someone else's thunder, but know why it is that you're actually doing it. Have a question that you're trying to answer before you kind of embark on any type of load management exercise.
I'm still searching for it because there is a disconnect with the communication between some of our staff, and until the communication and everybody's on the same page, I think that's the biggest challenge.
For me, it's to empower the staff operators with the safety net to innovate and trial and error and define their own process. Because much of what we're seeing with kind of load management resistance is around just people feeling insecure, or leadership not being very clear on this is okay to try this out, to figure this out together, which is really important if you want to have coaches, doctors, data people, sports scientists collaborate together.
Yeah, and then for me, just building on that, I think it's realizing that, like I said earlier, this isn't really anything new. This has been around for a while, just applied in a different way. Load management is really just a proactive application of what had been going on earlier for the return to play and bringing someone back from injury.
Thanks. Anybody else? Any other questions? Yeah.
Thank you. This has been fascinating. You opened a door for me a little bit when you talked about sports specialization. So I'm wondering, in terms of, you hinted, especially working at the collegiate level, where maybe you have these high school kids coming up that were sports specialized, and now you're dealing with some of the aftermath with that. So is there anything that you could speak to in terms of, I guess you could call it load management for, say, that multi-sport athlete in high school that used to maybe just be where their feet were? If you were in the fall season, you were in your fall season. You're in winter season, you're in winter season. But now these kids are in their season, but then being pressured to do some kind of cross-training concepts so that they're getting ready for their next season or even the season thereafter.
Yeah, I don't even know if they have different seasons anymore. They're just one big season. And I spoke before about the miles on the car. You could have the same year and of a car, and you go pick it, and one has 50,000 miles on it, and one has 10. And how do you train that differently? And I mean, my conditioning this summer with some of our bigger athletes that have more mass, I would say we walked. And it was they go from 0 on their technology, whatever they're doing, to 100 at basketball practice. And there's no in between. Nothing. And actually, it was a huge success that we would walk 3 miles a day because I decreased impact. She got in shape. We weight trained. We did all these things. And I think conditioning is looking different for me as a coach. So these athletes, when I ask them when they started playing year-round basketball, 5 years old, year-round. So then research says, well, I'm getting them, and they have double the volume that I had as a high school player. So in essence, their chronological age might be 28 by the time I get them, and yet they're untrained, they're specialized, they have overuse injuries, and it's it is. I feel like I'm juggling axes, chainsaws, glassware. And it is a nightmare in terms of what we're trying to handle.
Anybody else? Any other questions? I think we're almost up on time, so.
I'll
Yeah,
just say
go ahead.
this. In a universe where we do continue with the hyper specialization from an early age, I think the technology is out there to collect data from earlier ages. Because when we talk load management, we're thinking mostly pros and maybe some colleges. But we can collect great data about athletes even when they're in their teens, and I don't think that's being done enough today.
Yeah, there's high schools now that are using Catapult, and who knows what the quality of it is, but it's a start. Yeah.
Anybody else? Last call? Nobody? So I think it's a wrap. So, I want to thank you to the panelists today. That's great. Thank you. Thank you all.